There are many legendary CEOs in the gaming business, and while many of them were famous for either their charisma, their business acumen, or their larger-than-life personalities, I can think of only one who was famous for all three. And he's our guest today on the Video Game Newsroom Time Machine, Mr. Wild Bill Stealey. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Carl.
Okay, now, there's a million things I can ask you. Don't want to, but I need to get the one story that, yes, has been told a million times before, but it's worth repeating. How did your work with Sid Meier on Hellcat Ace come about?
I think it's a confluence of challenges that just happened to work out. So, as you know, I went to the Air Force Academy. I was an Air Force officer, and I was flying C-5As. I didn't want to be an airline guy, so I went back to the Wharton Business School and got a degree in finance. And then I went to work for McKinsey for a few years, which is one of the better consulting firms in the world. And when it was time for me to leave McKinsey, I ended up going to work for General Instrument as the director of strategic planning. Now, what that meant, who knows, was back in the early 80s. But what it really meant is I had to do financials. I had to do cash flows, income statements, balance sheets. And my boss gave me a big green pad, a whole box of number 2 pencils, and said, "Good luck." I'm a smart, lazy person because I could see that was going to take me 6 months and I was going to be doing a lot of erasing. So I went out to find a time-sharing service so I could put it on there, program it one time. I had learned to program in Fortran when I was at the Air Force Academy, so I figured I'd find a way to do this. Well, my boss wouldn't pay for the time-sharing service, so I went out and decided that I heard of this brand-new thing called VisiCalc, and it was the first spreadsheet. It was done by a friend of mine named Dan Bricklin, brilliant guy. Never made a lot of money from VisiCalc, and of course it was stolen by a number of other companies, including Microsoft. But anyway, Dan Bricklin invented the spreadsheet, and I went to buy a computer. So I found something called a Trash 80, a TRS 80, a Radio Shack with 16K of memory. And next to it was a better-looking computer. It was brown, and it had some kind of fruit on it with a bite out of it. And it had 4 colors versus the 2 colors in the Trash 80. And next to it, I heard explosions. I go, "What is that?" The guy says, "That's a toy computer." I said, "Well, what is it playing?" He says, "That's Star Raiders." I said, "Well, does it do VisiCalc?" He goes, "Yes." I said, "I'll take that one." And that was the Atari 800. He thought it was a toy computer, but hey, I've been playing games on computers since 1963. When I won the National Science Foundation contest, they sent me to the Army Signal Research Development Labs in Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, for 6 weeks for me to program helicopter simulations. And we were programming by moving jumper cables. We didn't have code. We moved jumper cables, believe it or not. But that was my early gaming. And again, guess what? It was a helicopter simulation. Gunship, here we come.
Exactly.
So I heard there was this guy named Sid Meier, and he has a user group called Smuggers, Sid Meier's user group. So I went to see who Sid Meier's user group was because he was supposed to be the expert at General Instrument in the Atari 800. I decided, I spoke to Sid. He's a really nice fella. But I decided that maybe they weren't doing it exactly legally. And he said they weren't stealing games, they were just borrowing. That's called quibbling at the United States Air Force Academy. So I didn't want to deal with Mr. Meier. And he didn't think he was stealing because he said, "We're not selling them, we're just looking at them." I said, "Well, that's quibbling." So I left and didn't deal with Sid. Now, about 2 months later, we go to Las Vegas and we have 200 salesmen tell us how good they're going to be next year because that year was very bad for General Instrument. And Sid and I have been sitting. He was the only techie and I was the only financial guy. And we've been sitting there for 2 days and we're bored to tears. And Sid leans over and goes, "Hey, Bill, I know where there's some games." I said, "Where?" He says, "Follow me." And we snuck out of the conference and went downstairs at Bally's there right at the corner in Las Vegas. And he beat me on every coin-op machine there was downstairs. And then I saw one called the Red Baron. And I said, "Okay, Meyer, here's a quarter. I can beat you because I'm flying for the Guard. I'm flying A-37s, man, jets." And I sit down and score 75,000 points. I'm number 3 on the all-time hit list. I'm going, "Yay, I win." Follow that up, Meyer. He sits down and scores 150,000 points. I'm going, "How did you do that?" He says, "Well, I watched you play and I memorized the algorithms." I said, "You did what?" Sid watched one time and he memorized the algorithms and he knew exactly where they're going to put up the bad guys and he shot them down. So I lost my quarter. And he says, "This isn't a very good game. I could write a better game in a week." Well, a fighter pilot doesn't like to be out-bragged. So I said, "Okay, if you can, I can sell it." I was just shooting the breeze. So about 3 weeks later, it wasn't a week, Sid tugs on my very expensive Brooks Brothers suit, because Sid's always wearing jeans and a University of Michigan T-shirt, and I've got my collar pin and my vest. I'm trying to be Joe businessman. He goes, "Bill, you said you could see this," because Sid is not as big a guy as I am, and he said, "You said you could see this, sell this." I went, "What?" He said, "You said you could sell this," because he'd written Hellcat Ace. Well, I went, "Oh my God, I got caught bragging." So I took it home, played it on my Atari 800, wrote him a 4-page memo on why it was not good enough. And I gave it back to him, and he walked away all dejected. About a week later, he brought it back and said, "I fixed all those things." I went, "Oh, crap." So we wrote a business plan that we would charge off, make enough money selling games to the mail to charge off our cars to the IRS. And I took a trip to General Instrument up in New York, and I stopped on the way back in Rahway and went into a computer store about 8:45. It was closing at 9. And at 9 o'clock, the guy says, "We're closing, sir. Can I help you?" I said, "I've got a game I want to show you." He says, "Everybody shows you." I said, "Please, can I just show you this game?" We sat and played Hellcat Ace for 2 hours. Wow. He said, "Okay, I'll take 100. I said, "Okay." He said, "What's the price?" I looked around the store. I said, $29.95. He goes, "No, you don't understand. I'm a retailer. I get half off." I went, "What? you get half off?" I didn't know. I'd never sold retail before. So I said, "Well, yes, sir, and I'll get those to you next week." I left the Rahway train station. I ran to catch a train to go on the way home, and I called Sid, and of course, I had a payphone. I had to call Sid on the payphone. I said, "Sid, we need 98 more," because he had one and I had one, and this guy wanted 100. "And how are we going to package you, Sid?" He said, "I don't know. What do you think, baggies?" So we hired the next door neighbor kid to use 2 Atari drives and make 100, and we put them in baggies from the local Giant store, and we dot matrix some instructions. And the guy got the 100. They were gone in a week. He ordered another 100. And the first 2 or 3 months, we sold about 2,000 around the various stores. And I just showed up and demoed the product. And then I'm going by this in December of our first year. Somebody calls the house, and my wife answers, "Microprose software." And we were Microprose because we didn't think Sid Smuggers was going to be a good name for software. And Sid came up with we're writing pros for microcomputers. So that was Sid's idea. And he says, "Can I speak to your sales manager?" Now, she didn't know what to say. She said, he's on the road." He goes, "You're a small company, aren't you?" I go, "Yeah." She goes, "Yes." She says, "Will you have him call me when he gets home from work?" And that was Jerry Wallacenko from a distributor up in Massachusetts. And he called me and said, "Well, let's talk. I'm a distributor. I want to sell you games." I said, "Well, that's great. And you'll pay me 50%. He says, No, I'm a distributor. I only pay you 40%. And I went, "Well, Jesus, this is getting worse and worse. And by the way, I get credit." But Jerry sold about $500,000 worth of Hellcat Ace. I sold another $500,000 just calling computer stores and asking to buy it when they wouldn't have it. I said, "You're a crummy store. I'm never coming again," and hang up. And I'd do that 3 weeks in a row. And the 4th week, I'd call up and sell it to them. So we made our own market. And it took me 2.5 years to get Sid to quit General Instrument because he didn't think we were going to make it. He thought it was ridiculous having a game company because he'd sold 4 games for $800. I took Hellcat Ace and sold over $1 million. And so that's how we got started.
That's an amazing story. And hey, you got to have the right salesman, but also the right product, I guess.
Well, you have a brilliant software guy like Sid, and you have a guy who never gives up like me. We had a game called Floyd of the Jungle. Nobody would buy Floyd of the Jungle unless I went in and spent all day at a computer store, and I'd sell 200 of them sitting at a computer store all day playing it. Because people go, "Wow, you can use 4 joysticks, 4 of us can play against." So Sid made that so me and my 3 kids could all play on the Atari 800 because it had 4 joystick ports.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
and then the other one was called Chopper Rescue, and that was a two-player game that was cooperative. So you have one pilot and one gunner, and we used to have a great time. And both of us be sitting there playing, and we loved that game, and we sold it to CBS for $50,000 plus royalties. That was a big sale for us. $50,000 plus royalties, and I'm still working full time at General Instrument during the day and doing this all at night.
Was there any? Sorry.
No, so that's how it all got started.
Cool. Was there ever any conflict between you guys working at General Instruments and this side business where intellectual property rights, or they wanted to have a piece of this action or something?
Well, my boss knew I was doing this because I told him, that computer I did, because I was still doing all the balance sheets, income statements, and financial. I was going to New York and presenting our division's plan for the next 5 years every 6 months. So my boss, who is not with us anymore, had been one of the inventors of Fortran. So he was famous in the computer world, but he was kind of a bully. And he bullied all the people that work for him. And I'm there about 2 months, and he doesn't like something I've said because we're using slides to put the presentation up there. And he turns all red in the face, starts coming at me. And I said, Jack, you take one more step, I'm going to lay your old bottom on the ground. Now, I boxed light heavyweight at the Air Force Academy. And, I respect everybody. I like everybody. But I don't like people that are bullied. And from then on, I was Jack's boy. He announced 2 weeks later that I was going to take over him when he retired 20 years from now. Of course, he was already 65. I'm going, 20 years from now? And then when I announced about a year later that I was leaving General Instrument to do this, he says, Bill, it's just games. You can be here in a real business and do that on the side. What are you doing? And then for the next 5 years, I'd hear from Jack every 3 or 4 months. How's it going, Bill? So I thought it was pretty nice. He supported us. He encouraged me. And I was his boy because I was the only guy in the whole division that stand up to him.
That is, you gotta show that you're not going to take any crap from people sometimes.
Well, you know why I learned that, and this is off subject, but I was beat up in the 9th grade by 12 guys.
Oh wow!
And I came home, and my mother said, I hope the other guy looks worse. I said, well, Mom, I didn't hit him. She says, you didn't hit him? She hired the next door neighbor kid to beat me up every Tuesday and Thursday for about 3 months. And about 3 months later, he said, Miss Stealey, I'm quitting. She says, why? He says, Bill's hitting too hard. And about 4 months later, after the black eyes were gone, the same 12 jumped me again, and I kicked the living daylights out of 3 of them. And they all got up and ran off because I was hitting too hard. And the football coach says, well, I saw that, Bill. I could have stopped that, but you were doing all right. You want to play football for me? And that was the first time I did any sports in 10th grade. And then I was first string basketball, football, and lacrosse for the next 5 or 6 years. So Mom was, had no idea how to manage a boy. So it took a little learning on my side.
Oh, geez. It's tough breaks, unfortunately.
This stories can go on for days. I apologize.
No. Hey, this is the personalities of this industry are part of the reason why it fascinates me and I do the show. I want to understand where these people are coming from who built an industry out of nothing. Because, Microprose starts, I believe, 1982?
Yes, sir.
When we get started. So at this point, the fact that you're going from company to company, some store to store to sell the software tells us a little bit about just the infrastructure that existed at the time. Not much. And so once you guys have this first success, do you do what does the business side of you decide to do? How do you start to approach this to make it a little bit more professional?
I decide that we need an office that's not my kitchen. So I go find a little office close to General Instrument because Sid was still at General Instrument. I need him to come over at lunchtime. So I got a few offices. I hired 3 people, a financial, accountant. I hired a guy just to do the running around, and he's still a friend of mine on Facebook. And I hired one other guy. I can't remember what I hired him to do. And then I brought Sid over, and I had a little area for Sid, and and it was pretty small for 2 desks. I said, Sid, what do you think would happen if I put the 2 desks, like up against each other? He looks at me, he looks at the desk, looks at me, and goes, "They'd mate." Sid was like that. He was funny all the time, but he didn't want to participate in the management. I would give him checks after we started making a little money, and he'd put them on top of his refrigerator. I had to go over to his house and take them up top of the refrigerator, deposit them because our accounting was all screwed up. So we had a little office, and then the next summer, we weren't doing well, and we had a $15 for the month of July or something. I hawked my Volvo to pay salaries.
Wow.
So, and of course, right after that, we went to a trade show, and a company called Hessware offered us $250,000 for Solo Flight. I'm excited. $250,000 for one little title, publisher. The Hessware was a publisher back then. And we came home from the CES there in Chicago, and I said, Sid, what do you think? And he thinks about it for a second, and he goes, I don't know. And I start to walk out. He says, but I hired a Wharton MBA to make those kind of decisions, and I'm thinking if you sell the family jewels, it's not the right thing to do. So he didn't want to make business decisions, but he always had a comment. And as I walked out, I go, yep, he's right. That's the family jewels. And Hessware went bankrupt about 2 months later. And I took the game to Sears and sold them 50,000 units in September, and they paid for them in a month.
Damn.
So,
wow.
So and that's what it was. I was learning on the fly. I was learning retail. I was learning distribution. I was learning marketing because I was doing it all. I was doing the finance. I was doing the spreadsheets. I was doing everything. Sid was making the cool games. I was making the business.
Exactly.
We did have one small problem, though.
Yes.
I hired a young lady to sit in my basement once the summer of '83, and all of a sudden Sid started hanging out in my basement.
Oh.
He married her. They have a child together, smart as a whip. And she divorced him when she came home from visiting her mother, and Sid had removed all the furniture in the dining room and put sawhorses and a big piece of plywood and built Gettysburg in paper mache so he could make a game out of the attack on Gettysburg. And she's a great girl, and Sid and she are still good friends. In fact, a few years ago, he took his wife, his ex-wife, and his son on a cruise. I'm going, wow.
The king of strategy games. He's got a plan.
He liked that way more than he liked the military games. The military games were my idea because I was active in the Guard at the time, and then I went on to the Pentagon. So I was an active reserve Air Force officer. So I was flying O2s and A-37s in the Guard, and then I got a chance to be the first reserve officer on the Joint Staff. So I went to the Joint Staff, and one quick story there is we were I was there on my 2 days of the month, and they announced the stealth fighter.
Oh.
Went, wow, because we're getting ready to ship stealth fighter. Wow, this is so good. And Tom Clancy, who was a friend of ours in Baltimore, said, oh, it's going to be the F-19. So we're getting ready to ship F-19 stealth fighter, and it came down about 1 o'clock. It's the F-117A. I went, well, damn. So we shipped F-19 stealth fighter, and we sold about $25 million worth in the first year. And the next year, we redid it, changed the packaging, and sold another $25 million worth over the years of F-117A stealth fighter. So there you go. But people all over the world were sending us notes saying, you need to put nukes on that. I'm going, nukes? Let's not go nukes, okay? But we had a great time. And we, in all those simulations, sold, most of them sold $5 to $10 million over the years we sold them. And we took F-15 Strike Eagle and made it on 26 different formats in Europe and in Japan. So we were taking any successful game and putting it on as many formats as we could.
And so that's an excellent question because it's hard for people, young'uns nowadays who are gaming, to really understand how many different formats existed back in the day. I mean, nowadays it's 90% PC, and then you got 2 or 3 consoles, and that's it. But we had so many platforms. I think, how did you guys juggle that, and what was the economics of all those ports? I mean, were there systems? How many did you have to move on a particular system to warrant a port to that system?
Well, given that what we were spending on games was a lot less than they're spending on games now, Sid could do 4 games in a year.
Wow.
Okay? 4 games in a year.
Okay.
And Sid wouldn't go to anything but the Atari 800. He loved the Atari 800 because Sid really wasn't a programmer. He was a systems manager of some kind. He taught himself programming. He was actually very good at music. That's why we ended up doing CPU Bach. And if you never heard of CPU Bach, you need to look it up because he
3DO.
No, CPU Bach was our game that Sid, Bach was deaf, but he did everything mathematical. Sid loved mathematics and computers and some music. So he took all of Bach's music, analyzed it, and made all new original Bach works using the same format that Bach did. So you go to CPU Bach and you'll hear new Bach tunes. So there you go.
Beautiful.
So, yeah, it's really good. So what did you ask me? I forgot where we were.
Oh, sorry. We were talking about ports and the financial viability of them back in the day.
Well, I hired 2 of our good friends from General Instrument. They were looking for part-time jobs, and it was Andy Hollis and Grant Irani. Now, Grant Irani was Iranian, but he looked like he was from Germany, so I didn't know. But there's part of Iran who has a lot of people that came from northern Europe. I don't know if anybody knows that. But Grant Irani, and I'm sure that's not his birth name, he did a very good job converting, and Andy Hollis did a very good job. And then together they did MIG Allies. So Sid would do a game, he'd hand them the Atari code, they'd go to work on it, and I was paying them not giant money, but enough that they thought they had a good part-time job. And that's how we went from the Atari 800 to the Commodore 64. And then somewhere in there, Kenny Williams convinced me to look at the PC Junior. And we started trying to do PC Junior things. I think in the middle, we did a couple Apple games. We did Amiga. We did
Atari ST.
The Atari ST, we did the NEC 8800, the NEC 9800, we did the Z80 machines because Sir Clive Sinclair knew who we were and came to us. So we were,
really?
Yep, and Sir Clive asked me to his suite at CES so he could talk me into doing work for him. And basically, we had not gone to England yet. We didn't go to England until about we were selling games in England through a distributor, good old U.S. Gold, in 1986. And I went over there and went to Boots, and this is another story I'm launching into, I apologize. And Boots didn't know who Microprose was. Okay. And I said, see your list of top 10 games? 6 of those are ours. He said, no, that's U.S. Gold. I said, no, that's me, and if you don't talk to me, I'm going to take them off your list. Oh, boy, I got to talk to him. From then on, I fired U.S. Gold and hired our own people. We started our own office in there, 87 or so, and ended up getting to about 10 million in sales very quickly because they take our games and make them in European formats. We had 300 people working in Tetbury, England, to make English versions of all the games we were doing in Hunt Valley, Maryland.
Awesome. And what were the other European markets like for you guys back then?
Well, we started our first European company with a guy who tried to convince me that Tetbury, England was the software distribution capital of the world. And I believed him because I was very naive. And when I went over to visit and we got to Tetbury, I said, I thought you said this was software distribution capital of the world, of Europe. He says, well, it will be since we're here. It's where he lived. So, wow, cool. And then I decided, because my daughter wanted to go to Paris, I'd go to Paris and start an office. So we did. And then we went to Germany and started an office. And they ended up having about 10 employees in France and maybe 20 in Germany. But, with all the rules in Europe, it was a little harder with employees that weren't that good. But all my employees were very good. They did a great job. They were really into it. I think of all the employees I've had all the years, there's probably 3 that I wouldn't do business with because of their lack of integrity. Because one thing about being an Air Force Academy graduate, tell the truth. You can tell me a little fib once in a while if you're just trying to brag, but don't tell me an outright, falsehood. I'm not coming back no matter how much. And I've had all those guys apologize, but I'm not going there. You got your chance. So Europe turned out to be, in fact, I took my 2 new daughters. I got married again in 98. I took my 2 new daughters to visit Paris and took them to the top of the Eiffel Tower, and they loved it. And they said, okay, Dad, I'm their new dad. I'm their bonus dad. They said, we found an apartment on the Champs-Elysees you need to buy for us. I go, right. So we did very well with Microprose in Europe. And then we did take venture capital. You asked me that. We took $3 million from somebody. And then I wanted to get out of that. One of the worst decisions I ever made was going into the coin-op business. I will not explain that to you because it's another long story. But I spent about $8 million doing coin-op. I sold about $8 million. So it was almost break even, but we had to get rid of that debt. And that's why I ended up going public and ended up selling the company. So.
Yeah. And going just back for a moment, I know you also had a few run-ins with the German censorship on especially the military strategy games.
They're selling me $10 million. We won the lawsuit. We won the lawsuit. Mm-hmm. They told us that we couldn't sell them, that we were illegal somehow. I think we had a swastika in one of the airplanes or something. I don't remember what the deal was. And it turned out when we actually hired our lawyer over there in Germany and went to work on it, they hadn't even opened the game. They didn't know a thing about the game. I said, it's a simulation game. And my lawyer went through the whole thing. And in the end, we won, and we were awarded $10 million by the court. Never saw a penny of it.
Oh, jeez.
Not one penny. Because they said, now go sue us for the money. I went, what? Well, we won him. Now we got to sue you again? So anyway, but the deal was also that as long as I didn't put swastikas in anything, I could do military simulations. They hadn't opened the package. They hadn't played the game. They didn't know anything about it. Just the idea of a World War II flight simulation they didn't like.
Oh, jeez.
That's all it was.
They got
a year effort to get over that.
Oh, man.
And we were selling a lot. I think Pirates was a top game in Europe and Germany for about 2 years. And I love Pirates. That's one that I don't think anybody owns. I'm thinking about redoing it again. If you've never tried it, it's a great game, and all my kids loved it, and I loved it. And it's one of those adventure games, go around the Caribbean, find gold.
Mm-hmm. No, I still own my original copy on the Commodore 64, the one that the box was in the shape of a book, a hardcover book inlay, and when you open it up, it had all of the discs and the manual and everything on the inside. I still own that. I've never given that one up. I love that game to death.
Yeah, well, yeah, I always thought it was funny on the Commodore 64 is load quote star quote comma 1. Huh? And then it take 20 minutes to load your cassette, and then it get almost in, and it quit, and you have to start over. So we start out on 5 1/4-inch floppies. Europe talked us into doing cassettes because there were a lot of people with cassettes in Europe, and then we went to the smaller floppies, and then Kenny Williams started doing CDs, and we had to go there. He told us CDs is where it's going to go, Bill. It's all going to be on CDs. Okay. And one of the other things interesting, in 1987, Sid and I were playing online games. Nobody else was playing online, but he built a game that he and I could play tank warfare against each other.
Oh,
we couldn't put anybody else in it, but we were driving tanks and shooting each other down. Great fun. I had an office in my basement in Hunt Valley, and Sid and I'd get on every night and play some game he was working. He was always good about doing, prototypes, because he didn't like to finish a game. He said, well, let's try this. What do you think of this? So I spent, 80% of my time actually doing management and finance and marketing, but 20% of the time I was his chief play tester. And I loved it, and I'm still the chief play tester in my little business right here.
And it actually comes through in a big way. Now, Pirates was a bit of a change because you guys had really established yourselves as the military simulation guys. And Pirates changed that tone. I mean, it's a very different type of game.
All because of the girl in my basement.
Really? Okay, now I got to hear it.
Beautiful young lady. Sid's 6 or 8 years younger than me. I don't remember exactly. And this young lady was maybe 4 years younger than him. And he started visiting because he's a very shy guy. Okay. He had a girlfriend and she disappeared. I don't know whatever happened to that. But she was also a general instrument. And then he started showing up in our basement. So he finally got enough guts up to ask her out. Great. And then after some talking to by his partner, he invited her to go to the Caribbean with him. Now, that's pretty exciting. A beautiful, young, blonde beauty, and she really was a cutie. And she said, okay, I'll go to the Caribbean. So they go to the Caribbean, and they check in the hotel. Boy, I think he's going to have a good time. I can't wait to hear all the stories. And about the next morning, she calls me. She goes, I can't find Sid. Oh, boy, we've lost Sid. Sid had gone out exploring the history of whatever island they were on, and somebody started talking to him about the pirates, and he didn't come home. And she's down there by herself in the Caribbean going, Bill, I can't find Sid. So I called the police, and Sid said, oh, I was going to go back. Yeah, right, Sid. Hey, look, you got a girl, a beautiful young lady waiting for you at the hotel, and you're out discovering pirates. So they got him home. They had a great time. I think I don't know how soon after they got married, but that was his interest because he went to the Caribbean with our beautiful young assistant.
Oh, that's
and of course, Pirates was I had a house that looked over the beach in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, and we had 3 Commodore 64s looking out on the porch, looking out at the beach. And I have 3 kids. So if you got up and went to the bathroom, you lost your spot. You had to wait for somebody else to go to the bathroom because we were all playing Pirates all the time right next to each other. So we really love that game. And all my kids and grandkids have loved Pirates. I've taught them all how to play it, and we've got multiple copies of it. So love the game and love the whole thing. So Sid, he did mostly the military simulation I asked him for, and then he got tired of that, and he did Covert Action, and he did, Railroad Tycoon was stolen from Avalon Hill. You know that, right?
I've heard versions of that story, yeah.
And Civilization was stolen from Avalon Hill.
That one I've heard that you guys actually had to pony up some cash for a licensing, or
no, I bought Eric Dot 3 martinis and he signed the release. Come on, man. I'm a better salesman than that.
So was that, and a voucher for the board game was included in the package, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
But Eric called me with Railroad Tycoon, and they were just a few miles away in Baltimore. He said, Bill, Sid's stealing my game. So we got together for lunch, and we talked about it, and he had a game called Railroad, and we were doing Railroad Tycoon, but it was really based off the board game, let's be very clear. And then, 2 years later, Sid's showing me this really cool game that's out exploration, and it's Civilization. And I get a call from Eric, and he goes, Sid's doing it again. I went, oh, crap. Let's get together for lunch. And I bought him 3 martinis, and he's feeling no pain. And I put the piece of paper from him. He signed it, and we did the switching the promotion of the other person's game in the box. So there you go. And then, of course, after I left, there was a giant lawsuit. I think Hasbro might have bought Avalon Hill. I don't know whatever happened to Avalon Hill.
I think it was Hasbro bought them up. Yeah.
Yep. But the famous baseball player thought I was buying it from Boston, who raised $150 million from the state of Massachusetts and went through all of it in about 2 years, start to finish. It was a pitcher on the Red Sox. So that's another long story. But anyway, we did not own Platoon Leader, which is the game he was after. Because evidently they played it in the while they were waiting to go to a baseball practice or whatever they did. So great fun. And Civilization failed when we put it out.
Yeah, I've heard about that. It had a lukewarm reception. I could never understand why.
Oh, you ready to hear?
Yes, please.
So we're all playing it. We all think it's terrific. I'm all excited about it. I shipped 15,000 to EB. Boy, and they're going to pay me quick. Well, about a month later, I got 14,000 back. I'm
Wow.
berserk. I go back in the back and I get all the guys together, including Sid. And I said, guys, we all like this game. Why do you think nobody else does? Well, a couple of guys said, well, we get stuck sometimes. I said, well, what do you do when you get stuck? I said, well, we go into Sid's office and ask him what we should do next. Ding, 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 ding. I said, we need to put Sid in the box. And that's why all the science advisors, military advisors came. That was supposed to be Sid in the box to give you a hint. If you get stuck, if you weren't making progress, the little hint thing would come up and say, oh, I think you should invent gunpowder. I think you should invent the wheel. And that's Sid in the box. And I shipped it out, and I got Robin Williams to get a copy and try it, and he talked about it on television. The rest is history, as they say.
Really? Okay, now I've got to try to track down that Robin Williams clip because that would be amazing. So wait, so you're telling me there's about 1,000 copies of a version of Civ out there that does not have the advisors in it?
Well, when we shipped it, I don't know whether that was 90, 91, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
There's those that do not have the science military advisors. Yes, sir.
Oh, that I need to track down. See, I played it on the Amiga, unfortunately, so by then that port already had all the advisors built into it.
Yep.
So,
well, Sid and I was on the board of the Software Publishers Association, and Robin Williams was our speaker, and the only fee he wanted was games for life from everybody. And he sat with Sid and I, and he kept us in stitches for about an hour and a half before his talk, and then kept everybody, all 600 of us, in stitches for 2 more hours. I mean, he did a great job. He loved games. I think he liked hugging my wife even more, but we won't go there.
Well, he did name his daughter Zelda after the game, so.
Well, he did like games. That's very true.
Yeah. Oh,
well, I have a great story. Better not tell that one.
Oh,
a famous actor.
We're among friends here. Come on.
Well, yeah, you're recording this. A famous actor. I won't tell you who he was, but somebody recognized him, and there's a word from his movie his movies, about 6 of them. They always said these sets of words. And this guy next to me, who was trying to get a job with me, who ended up being the president of Sega, was being nasty to this famous actor sitting there with his girlfriend. And this famous actor had a yellow T-shirt on. So I go to the urinal, and I'm standing there relieving myself. I'm in my business suit, 3-piece collar pin, trying to be Joe Business, and the yellow T-shirt signs up beside me, and he goes, "Who's the dirtbag at your table?" I went, "Oh, I'm sorry, sir. We're in the game business." He's looking at me. He says, "Oh, you're in the game business. What's your best game?" I said, F-15 Strike Eagle. He goes, "You're not Wild Bill Stealey, are you?" I go, "Yes, sir, I am." He says, "I love your games. After we wash hands, can we each get each other's autograph?" So this famous actor, way more famous than anything I ever did, wanted my autograph because he loved Strike Eagle. So there you go. So we had a lot of people in Hollywood that loved games. We moved around a lot, didn't we?
Oh, geez, yes. You guys, tracking some of your guys' histories is a challenge in and of itself.
Mine's pretty simple. I just been here hanging out on the East Coast doing games. Everybody thought no games could be done on the East Coast. The Baltimore Sun credits Sid and I with starting 30 software companies around Baltimore, because all our alumni went out and started companies. And then we came to Raleigh, North Carolina, and they credit us. We were the first game company in the Cary, North Carolina. Now there's 20 or 30 of them, because people saw, hey, if Bill can be successful, look, we can too. And there's a whole bunch of companies started by Microprose alumni and Interactive Magic alumni. And Tom Clancy followed me to Cary, North Carolina, because he and I couldn't make a deal. And he hired the Admiral, and they started Red Storm right there, about 2 miles from our own office. So it's kind of fun.
Well, when you say you couldn't make a deal with him, what was the deal that you were looking for with him?
We did Red Storm Rising.
Yeah.
Okay? We paid him a lot of money. He said, wow, this game business is interesting. And I write books that they like to make games out of. So he wanted to be the majority owner of a new game company that I was going to run and do all the work. He was just going to give me a few books. That wasn't going to work for me. because I'm willing to pay him, not a commission, but at the time a royalty. But he wasn't going to be CEO because I knew Tom well, and it just wasn't going to work with him and I, because he's almost as bossy as I am. So that wasn't going to work. So he came down, and Red Storm took off, did very well. We traded employees half the time. And I played golf with his CEO many, many times because we belonged to the same country club. So
nice.
The Admiral and I would get together and commiserate about Tom made another decision. He'd call me at the Pentagon and say, Bill, I need some information. I said, Tom, one, this is not a secure phone. Two, you're not qualified to get that information, and quit calling me at the Pentagon. So he thought since he was Tom Clancy, everybody should talk to him. I don't know if you know, and I'm not disparaging Tom because he's not with us anymore, but the majority of the first novel was written by his next door neighbor, Larry Bond, who was a naval officer who didn't want to get in trouble for writing a novel while he was on active duty. And there you go.
Wow. Did not know that. Okay. But yeah.
Well, that's what Larry told me. I don't know that for a fact, but Larry told me that he was his good friend and he was at the Pentagon with me. So there you go.
Okay, cool. Oh.
You got any more questions? We can go on for days.
Yeah, no, yes, definitely. Okay, so towards the end of the 80s, Microprose starts the Microplay and the Microstyle labels. Now, what was the strategy behind those labels? Because it was very different style of game from what you guys were publishing up until that point.
We weren't making games fast enough for our European general manager. Let's be very clear.
Okay.
Our managing director thought he needed more games faster. So he's the one that went out and started licensing all those games. That was not my effort. And some of them were good and some of them worked. We actually did the first, only one I did was the first X-Men game and the first Spider-Man game. And the kids that did that up in Greensburg, Pennsylvania, turned into Take-Two. So,
really?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know
they were
that.
Microprose first. They were Microprose Greensburg. And when we were having some financial issues, I said, okay, guys, go back to being an independent studio. And Ryan Brandt, the founder of Take-Two, went over to see them, and he brought the money, and they were smart people. And he took Microprose Greensburg and turned it into Take-Two.
Wow.
And he offered me the vice chairmanship of that. He got 8 speeding tickets from New York in his vet down to the trade show that we were in Atlanta. The only one, I can't remember what it was. It wasn't Comdex. Could have been Comdex. And he wanted me to come be the vice chairman of Take-Two. And it didn't work out because there was a dirtbag in the middle who was had actually the chairman at the time of Interactive Magic, because he wanted me to come up when it was part of Interactive Magic at the time. And the guy that was running my company asked for a $5 million buy-in, and he said, Bill, I can't do anything like that. And he left it, but they were going to pay $200 million for Interactive Magic at the time.
Oh,
and that would have been really nice. I could have taken golf lessons because I need them.
Oh, wow. Okay. And so if you guys open up
it's amazing. One of the better stories is how many times Trip Hawkins and I tried to talk the other guy into joining with them.
Really?
One of these days, I'll tell you all my Trip Hawkins stories.
Oh, come on.
No, it takes too long. It takes too long. We'll do it another time. Because Trip and I just got to be friends on Facebook, and I just liked his page. We haven't talked in 20 years, but in the late 80s, he'd say, okay, Bill, let's get together. I'll do the sports games, and you do the simulation games. Okay, well, I'll be the boss. No, I'll be the boss. No, you'll be the boss. You'll be the boss. But, I mean, he did a great job with Electronic Arts. We started about the same time. He just had $5 million. I had $1,500.
Yeah.
So he was pretty smart get out there raising that venture money right off the top. But he almost went away with those first games because as good as they were, and they were good games, they just didn't sell as well as they needed because he started out on the Apple, for God's sakes. And he was in real trouble until he started doing the Sega Genesis stuff. And then Mr. Nakayama had to call me and said, I'm going to sue Trip. You get him on phone. We need to make a deal because he was not paying his royalties to Sega.
Yeah.
And he'd called me and said, Bill, we should do this together. He says, we'll go ahead and reverse engineer the thing. We won't pay the royalties. You put in 10 million, I'll put in 10 million. I went, right. Yeah, I felt that was cheating, reverse doing. But hey, it worked out for him. I made a deal with Mr. Nakayama and Tripp, and I was the middleman to get them to talk together. And Tripp ended up paying half the royalty to Mr. Nakayama, and he stopped the suit. But Mr. Nakayama was the biggest pirate in the entire world. Sega was originally an American company, right?
Yeah, service games.
It was stolen by Mr. Nakayama from Dave Rosen out of California, because Dave got tired of Mr. Nakayama pirating his coin-op games. And he said, take the whole thing. So they made a deal. But Mr. Nakayama was, every time Sega US came out with a game, he'd just make one similar and sell it for half price. So that's how Mr. Nakayama ended up owning Sega. And Mr. Nakayama had lots of nice dinners together. And he'd always say, well, Bill, let's go to dinner. I eat the live stuff, you eat the dead stuff, and I'll bring the girls. I go, okay. And he'd bring the girls, and they'd have 3 beautiful girls sitting at the table. And he'd say, okay, girls, time to go, 9 o'clock. And he'd get up and leave and take the girls and leave me with his staff. After trying to get me to eat really funny stuff that all wiggled. I did not like wiggly stuff.
I can't imagine why.
And Namco, the guy who ran Namco, his name was not Namco, but he was married to the Namco daughter. But so he changed his name to Namco, and they tried to get me to eat goldfish and crawfish, and oh my God, I'd eat anything to sell software. So let's be very clear, I did it. Have I talked too much already?
No, not at all. Not at all. Oh, that's phenomenal. Okay, so when you guys finally jump over and start making games for the NES and for consoles.
I was gone.
Okay.
We talked about doing NES. I was invited to Japan to be their keynote speaker at their Software Publishers Association, and I went in and made speeches, like 2 or 3 of them over 3 days, about U.S. distribution. Nintendo offered me the very first license, and I said, let me get this straight. I got to pay you $10 in advance before I can ship a product. That didn't make any sense, because my cost of goods were like a buck and a quarter, and I could throw it away and I'd be okay. But if I had to spend $10 and I don't know if it's going to sell, so I turned it down. It was probably a mistake, because those people that did it, and we had the money to do it, it just didn't seem right to me. And it's another one of my many business mistakes. I should have done it, but they did it after I left.
Okay.
I think Pirates was one of the very first ones they did on the NES.
Yeah, I know Pirates and F-15. I'm not quite sure which one came first from the Microprose catalog. Yeah. But yeah, I always wondered about that, because I would have thought Microprose would have been one of the first people on the platform.
We were offered it, and I decided to go in the coin-op business.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. Big mistake.
Yeah, it's...
Hey, you don't win them all. You don't win them all.
No. So, okay, you already told us that about Microprose doing the IPO, having to pay back the money and so forth. How does the merger with Spectrum Holobyte come about?
Because your friend Bill made another mistake. So when I went, had an IPO in '91, and on December 23rd, I'm getting ready to go on vacation with my family, and I get a call from Gilman Louie. He says, "Bill." I said, "Hi, Gilman. How are you?" Because we were competing. We saw each other at trade shows. Weren't great friends, but we knew each other, and I considered him a good guy. What the heck? And he says, "Bill, you need to send me $500,000. I went, "I need to do what?" He says, "You need to send me $500,000. I said, "Well, that's very nice. How about you send me $1 million? I'll send you $500,000. He says, "No, I'm going out of business because the famous paper guy, is like Murdoch."
Yeah. You're talking about the MirrorSoft group. What was his name?
No. There was a famous paper guy who was an investor in Spectrum Holdings.
Yeah.
Mossad threw him off his boat off of Spain.
Yeah. The company was the Mirror Group.
Okay.
And they had a software division called MirrorSoft. But what's his name? This is going to drive me nuts.
Robert Maxwell.
Robert Maxwell. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, but it's rumored that the Mossad threw him off his boat. I don't know if that's true or not. But anyway, he hadn't gotten any money in like 4 months, and he was going to go out of business. So I said, "Okay, Gilman. I mean, I had the money in the bank because we just went public, $30 million. I said, "What do we get?" He says, "We give you Falcon 3 for Europe." I said, "Okay, and we're not going to pay any royalties." He says, "Okay." So we got Falcon 3 for Europe, and I sent him $500,000 with no contract, just because he's a good guy. And I'm a dumb bunny. So anyway, I did that, and I went on on vacation. I come back, and my board now has all these financial people on it, because when we went public, I was told I needed to add 3 people. And I added financial types. I didn't know a darn thing about the game business. And I go to my first board meeting in January of 1992, and they said, "Bill, you've been running this company for 10 years. We think you need to take a sabbatical." I'm going, wow, I think that's a great idea, because I was going to go to the beach and play golf and go make speeches at colleges about entrepreneurship. And I really didn't want to do it, but I really did want to do it because I've been working 80, 90 hours a week for 10 years. Yeah. And I had 3 little kids, and I was flying for the Guard at the same time. So I said, wow, that's a good thing. I'll take 6 months. And I hired a guy, very good guy, West Point graduate, Harvard Business School, and put him in as a president. And I said, now we got 8 games. They all have to ship by 1 October. Because we had a bonus plan that the teams could get 25% of the first year's cash if they got the game out for 1 October. Remember, we're selling retail.
Yeah.
I could not tell them that we got the best explosion, but I can tell them that if I don't go out 1 October, I won't get a turn on November 1 or December 1. So I understood the retail by then good enough to know you have to have turns to sell retail.
Yeah.
And it's like the restaurant. You got to get them in, get them out. So you can sell more, but not today. Nobody's going to restaurants. So anyway, I had them all on a bonus, and it was a significant bonus. Well, my brilliant Harvard MBA, West Point grad, as soon as I leave to go on this 6-month sabbatical, he decides I'm being too mean to the software guys and the developers. He puts them on overtime. Do you know how many software projects get done on overtime? So we had 8 games due on 1 October 92. You know how many we shipped?
How many?
1, December 15th, F-15 Strike Eagle 3.
Oh, you're kidding me.
I got 600 employees. I got no cash flow. So I go
Jesus.
And I go to try and raise $14 million from GE Capital, and they're ready to sign. And my CFO calls me and says, "Bill, we have to restate earnings." Do you know what it's like when a public company restates earnings? They took off. GE Capital said, "No, if you're going to restate earnings, we don't want to participate with you." And all it was like $200,000 in inventory that they counted as shipped, and it was really still sitting in the warehouse.
Oh, no.
That's all it was.
Oh, my goodness.
So now it's May, and I'm really running out of cash. We're at a CES, and I'm on the 27th floor, and I've got a $10 million key man insurance. And I'd had a couple cocktails, and I was ready to jump off the roof because most of those people were my friends. I'd hired all of them. I didn't want them to lose their jobs. I felt terrible about it. And my CFO talked me down because I was ready to jump. And it's pretty tough because you started this company in my basement, and I called Gilman and said, "Okay, Gilman, bring your venture capital firm, Connor Perkins." And they came in, and a bunch of other people came in, and we went through a rigmarole for about a month and a half. And on June 21st, 1993, I signed the papers and went to play golf. So they brought enough money to take control of the board.
They took control of the board, and you didn't stay on.
I stayed on the board for about 6 months, but I knew they might be good financial people, but they didn't have a clue about running a software company. As much as I like Gilman, he was running a $6 million one. I was running a $50 million one. So he was even more of a micromanager than I was because he knew code. I didn't know code. I was a marketing guy and a finance guy. So I wasn't going to try and interrupt them and show them how to do code. I was going to give them the right incentives and pick the right products, and off we go. So staying on the board, and when I would offer a suggestion, the comment was something like, "That's the old way we used to do it. We're going to do a
Oh,
new way,
jeez.
Bill." So you can imagine, I've been running the company for 11 years, and from my basement up to almost 50 million in sales, it was time to leave.
Yeah, I can imagine. And so how long did you stay on the golf course?
I went to golf school maybe 15 times.
Okay.
So I actually got a little bit better, but certainly not enough to join the PGA Tour. But I was playing golf all over the world. We had a little excitement because one of the Microprose had the potential for buying more of my stock if they sent me a note. And they had to find me, so I hid for 6 weeks. And in the end, the judge says it didn't matter. So they got my stock at a big discount. But I went off and played golf for about 2 years. And then 2 years into it, they needed me to sign something. Microprose did.
Okay.
And so I got rid of my 3-year non-compete. They still wanted to keep the 250 mile because they didn't want me to go across the street and hire all the people back, which I would have done, I can assure you. So I said, where's the closest place? And I looked at Boston, decided too damn cold. I looked at Austin, decided it was going to be too damn hot. And my buddy said, well, why don't we go to North Carolina? I said, what's the heck's in North Carolina? I've been there, but I've never lived there. And he was in a group from a college in North Carolina called Davidson. And he called a bunch of his Davidson buddies, and we went down there, and they had lunch all set up for us with 10 presidents of software companies. And they were so excited that somebody was coming there that wasn't selling to IBM, because IBM had a big presence in Research Triangle near Raleigh. Okay. And they were all the little software companies were doing software and selling it directly to IBM. And I was going to be the first retail software company. So they offered me money, office space, programmers, computers, just because they wanted another software company, so maybe they could learn to sell their games someplace else. I'm going, wow, these guys are really nice. And they took my friend and I out to play golf the next day, and we had a great time. And he says, see, we can hire lots of programmers here. Your non-compete is over. So we started Interactive Magic basically about September of 94. And actually, I joined it in January of 95. And we went from zero to a little over 23 million in 3 years and took it public and sold it. So I'm really good at starting things, evidently. Not so good at managing them after they get big.
And you're still involved with Interactive Magic.
Well, I like the name so much that when I sold the company, I took that name back. I don't know if I still own it, however, that whatever the legalities of that is, but I changed the name of the company to iEntertainment Network because we were doing a lot of online gaming at the time. We had Warbirds. We had a whole bunch of bingo games and card games, and we were doing very well with internet advertising, and the Warbirds game was doing very well with us. So we probably went public because we were one of the first online game companies. I bought a bunch of games. I bought a company out of Key West, and they brought all these casual games to us. And basically their dig was they called themselves MPG Net, and basically they were taking a lot of Microprose games and turning them into a small online games. Like the Pirates game was a small online game. And some of those games are still running today by some of their former employees. And I have one of their former employees working for me right now. And he came in that acquisition. He said it was some 21 years ago. Holy mackerel. And I left the company for a couple of years. They did not do well. They, again, financial people, didn't know how to motivate software people, didn't know how to pick good products. They just figured it must be easy if Bill can do it.
Oh, geez.
And they ran it in the ground. And just right about 9/11, I was sitting in the office of the guy who was running it, and he was a good guy, but he didn't know anything about running. He was just hired out of the blue by the guy in New York who controlled the stock. And we were offered to be acquired by Take-Two and I was going to be vice chairman of Take-Two. And in the end, the guy who was controlling the board could never make a deal with Take-Two. And Ryan Brandt, the founder, who's gone, I don't know what happened to him, but he died very young. Got eight speeding tickets driving his Corvette from New York to Atlanta to see me at Comdex, where we had a helicopter, and everybody was really quiet at Comdex except us. I was in my flight suit, and I was blowing up stuff on a big screen in front of me, and everybody else was really quiet, and we're the only ones making noise. I figured it was great. We had such a good time, and I'm sitting there in our little fake cockpit right in front of the big screens and demoing the Apache game that we were getting ready to launch. And all of a sudden, I can feel two people's faces really close on either side of me. And I almost jumped out of my skin, and I looked, and there's two very attractive young ladies.
Okay.
And it was a friend of mine who'd been in the computer game magazine business, but now he was the assistant editor at Penthouse. And he brought these two girls by just to bother me when I was trying to fly. But that was kind of fun we had in the industry. And I mean, I'm not a short boy. I'm probably 6'1" or 2, and these girls in high heels were 3 inches taller than me. They were very attractive, but very large girls. He says, "You want a party?" I said, "I'd love to, but I'm trying to sell some games. Get out of here, Kurt." And we did very well. I mean, we sold Apache and Capitalism and all those games. Star Raiders. We did a game with Bruce Jenner back when he was a boy. Called Decathlon. Wow. And I traveled with Bruce for about a week in Europe, and I can tell you, he liked girls then. I don't know what happened to him. But anyway, it was great fun. It was like starting Microprose all over again. And we did okay, and we're growing away. And then when I left the company, they did not do a good job. And 3 years later, I came back just to rescue it. And I haven't done a very good job of that because I've kept it alive, and I've tried a bunch of little products, but we never had any real money because I spent all my Microprose money launching it. And in the middle, I owned a soccer team, which was one of the stupider things I ever did.
Which team did you own?
An indoor soccer team out of Baltimore called the Baltimore Spirit. Great fun. But it's not a way to make money. In fact, if you look up Baltimore Spirit on the internet, you'll see some of the videos. I mean, we had great fun. The average score was like 15-11.
In your favor?
Well, we did very well. But the issue is normal soccer is 1-0 or 2-0 or something ridiculous.
Yeah.
So the league we were in, called the National Professional Soccer League, we changed the rules. 3 points for a really good goal, 2 points for a regular goal, and 1 point if you get fouled by the goalie trying to make the goal. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can imagine that would rack up some points pretty quickly.
We were down with 1:04 to go, 21-11, and we won the game.
Oh, Jesus.
Because we just kept coming down and hitting from long range as soon as we could. And we scored 3 2-pointers and a 2-pointer, and ta-da, the game's over. I mean, we were pretty happy that night. There might have been a little drinking after that. But anyway, so we've made some progress since then. We had a consulting assignment with the U.S. Air Force that did very well for us. We kept improving the Warbirds game. It's still out there, still making money. We've had a bunch of, we tried a couple of mobile games. They all got good reviews. They all generated good money, but we never updated them like we should. Gotcha. So we need to update them. But then the even better news is we're going on to be Microprose again. Isn't that exciting?
That is, I mean, when I read that a few months back, I was really just like, okay, there's so much history here. So what is your role in the new Microprose?
I get to be the old fart who tells them how cool the old games were. And I'm consulting with David, but he's a really smart guy. He's a great artist, as Sid was. Sid was he wasn't even a programmer. He was a systems analyst and taught himself BASIC. But he was a historian. Sid could memorize books. He was a musician. And he could take a game and make it better. David Ligeti is very much similar, bright as can be, and he really trained to be a refrigeration specialist.
Really?
Yeah, in Australia, and was an apprentice. And when he was a refrigeration specialist, he had to learn a little bit about code, and he got into it, and he started doing code, teaching himself, very much like the system in the UK, because half my programmers were self-taught in the UK.
Yeah.
And because Sir Clive got him a Z80 machine back in what, 75 or 76, something like that.
It was more like, I think 79 is when he brings out his first one. But yeah, it was already percolating in the over there.
Yeah.
And the bedroom coder movement. Book, where's the Wild Bill Stealey biography?
I've been asked for that before, and I've just never done it. And every once in a while I think about it, because it's been an interesting life.
It's a hell of a story, hell of a run, and the best part is it's inspirational as hell.
Well, I try and motivate young people. I've spoken at a lot of colleges about entrepreneurship, and then all the young people say, I want to be in the game business. Well, they just think they're going to invent a game. So no, you got to learn history. You got to learn art. You got to learn programming. You got to learn math. You got to learn business, finance, and marketing. Which of those 7 roles are you interested in?
Exactly.
But you need to be good in one of them. You may end up running all of them, but you better be really good in one of them. Yep, and my partner here just said distribution. You got to know distribution. So I think that was the big deal with Sid and I, because he had sold 8 games, as I told you before. No, 4 games for $800, and I took the next one and did $1 million just by calling computer stores and complaining they didn't have the game, and I wasn't going to come in and see them anymore.
That is such a wonderful, wonderful anecdote that actually just, it feels so immediate. It's such a brilliant and simple idea.
I didn't know what else to do. You got to have some simple ideas when you got no idea what to do.
Just to close out, Bill, what would you say to all the Microprose fans out there listening right now?
I would say that David and his staff, with me pushing them every minute, are going to bring some great Microprose-like games back. And in a week or two, I can tell you about some of them, okay? Awesome. And here is what Sid and I always talked about. You read that?
Yes. Bill, we need to make games that require decisions with limited information, that are time critical with significant outcomes, and reward the player who makes the right decisions. That's the key to great games.
Good talking to you, sir. Okay, I got to go pretend to work. Good talking to you.
Same here.
We'll see you next time.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I hope you've enjoyed another Video Game Newsroom Time Machine interview. You can leave us comments on Twitter, Instagram, and if you like what we're doing here, drop us a couple of bucks on Patreon. All the links are in the description below.